Rule number one, don't open the door.
I need a little more up top and a little less down below.
Amber alert. Oh God, something's going to happen. Something's going to happen. Something's going to happen. In orbit of Uranus,
It smells.
I don't even want to talk about it.
Oh, no, you love me. You know you love me.
Just don't let it touch the
You know, that's great, but give me a little more.
Why? Why are you shooting at me?
You can't start the car. Johnny has the keys.
Hello, hello, hello out there in YouTube and podcast land. You have reached Johnny Has the Keys, where we talk about horror movies and science fiction films and those key elements that often lift and or separate them from the average genre fare. Are you new to us? Well, we are glad to have you. If you don't know, David and I are old friends that have been talking about horror and science fiction movies for longer than we care to admit. Now we are doing it every Monday for your, hopefully, entertainment. And if you're coming back, you already know this, and we would like to thank you for coming back. And I am here today with my dear old friend, David Horton, and my co-conspirator in these activities. How are you?
Dear old friend. Yes, thank you for that lovely introduction. We're excited to be here. We are unscripted. So one of the things that happens a lot is we just have a minimal structure to our show. We do not script it. It's more of a conversation. So you'll hear some ums and ahs probably sometime in there and some talking over each other because we get excited.
But we've been doing it for a while. Sometimes I try to edit those out, but not always.
Right. And we usually try to start with what's happening in your genre week. So what have you been doing genre related? I tend to cover science fiction. Tim covers horror, and we sometimes jump genres with each other. But I don't really have a big topic this week because I've been doing research. I had to do research for this particular episode, which is a double feature. And then next week, we have a double feature as well. So I've been doing a lot of research on that and watching documentaries and everything else. I can say it's very interesting how much information you can find on old movies. And that kind of made me, rather than do a genre topic or something, made me think about how we are processing movies now and entertainment and everything else. I think those of you who listen to us know that I complain sometimes about the children, my children, or the younger generation or whatever, and they'll call me up and say, well, I watched that movie you recommended and I didn't like it at all. And I said, did you watch it on your phone? And they said, yeah. I said, then you didn't watch it because you can't watch a movie on your phone. You really can't. It may be nice to have your headphones in and huddled under your blanket in the bedroom, whatever, but that's not watching a movie. I mean, I've gotten off my soapbox of a movie has to be shared and you should see it in a big room, giant screen. Yes, you should, but if you can't, an iPad will do, a television will do, nothing smaller than an iPad, and not an iPad mini. Doesn't work, in my opinion. Just give me my opinion.
And with an iPad, you need headphones usually too.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then early this year, where I was living, there was a huge snowstorm and everybody was iced in and snowed in and everything else. And it immediately made me remember, because of where my house is, I could walk to the local Blockbuster. And Blockbuster was like it. Friday and Saturday nights, Blockbuster was the place to be because that's where you got your movies.
Yeah.
And it's constantly brought up in corporate world what a disaster Blockbuster management was as far as not seeing the future, not seeing Netflix and not seeing digital and not being prepared for that.
I worked for a company that did the same thing, Borders. They did not
Yeah.
see the electronic books and all that, and they went out of business. Yeah.
Same thing. And we process movies so strangely now. But there's a lot of retro. In doing all this research, YouTubing a lot, and you see all these people, and they're like us. Their references to when they originally saw these films is VHS tape. And being able to rewind it was such a wild thing to do. And I follow a couple of TikTokers, and I love it because it's always Like one of them is a comedian and his daughter. So she's like in her early 20s. He's like in his mid 40s. And they each challenge each other every episode with bringing up stuff from their generation. So like an episode a couple of weeks ago was he said, okay, all we're going to do today is I'm going to give you some words and I want you to look up the words. And she went, okay, fine. And he goes, without your phone. And she goes, what do you what do you mean without my phone? And he said, without your phone. You can't look them up with your phone. And she goes, can I use the computer? He goes, no. And he goes, well, how am I going to look them up? And he goes, well, look beside you on the floor there. And she pulls up this ginormous box and he helps her open it. And she opens it and it's the Encyclopedia Britannica. And he goes, this is, and she goes, what are these? And he goes, this is how you're going to look up the words I'm going to give you. And she's like, what, how does this work? And it's all, this whole episode is hilarious of just her confusion of looking it up.
I saw a Jeopardy episode last night that said Mo Rocca, it was a celebrity thing.
Oh, yeah.
And they asked him how he prepared, and he said, I studied my 1974 World Book Encyclopedias. And I was like, I had those. I did too. That year, I think.
I read them. I read them religiously at night. And I remember the human body one because it had the little acetate. You could have the circulatory system and overlay it with the muscular system. It was just really cool. Yeah. Anyway, now we consume stuff so fast and so quickly, and part of it scares. I love the ease of it. I love the fact that I can say, hey, the day the earth caught fire, where can I find that? And I can find it digitally. Mm-hmm. But it was an effort to find this one for today.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
As opposed to not being able to get it at all. Or Blockbuster had it rented out and you couldn't get it because they only kept one copy and you had to wait till Bobby brought that back, and he was always late, paying his late fees and all. Anyway.
Yeah, we would never be able to be as diverse as we are with selection if we were relying on video.
Oh yeah, if this was the 80s or 90s, we would not be no. We would not have the plethora of titles that we have covered and been able to cover and everything else. Yeah. So that's what I did. I just kind of thought back on how we consume our movies now, and is that good, bad, and different? The pluses and minuses of that. Mm-hmm. So that's my old man description. Yeah.
Well, if you're coming off your old man, I'm going on to my old man. Excuse me. I'm going to talk about this. I'll try to be brief because I've talked about it before in our top fives, and I just want to get something on the record that I can probably put out there.
Okay.
And that is a little movie called World War Z. Came out in 2013. This is the third time I have watched this movie. I desperately want to like this movie because you know how much I love zombie films. Mm-hmm. I hate this movie. It's not a horror movie. It doesn't feel like a zombie movie. There's just way too much CGI and all of these no-win scenarios, so close getaways seem absolutely ridiculous because there's no way that would happen. And I did a little research, and I think I know why. It was directed by Mark Forster, same guy that did The Kite Runner, Monsters Ball, Finding Neverland, and no horror movies that you've ever heard of, because he didn't do any horror movies. He is not a horror movie director, and I think that may be why there's a problem with this movie.
Okay.
What's that?
I said, okay. I agree.
I would call this a political action thriller with zombies. Basically.
With zombies.
It's based on the novel by Max Brooks, and that's another problem because it doesn't even resemble the novel at all. The cast is good. It's got Brad Pitt, Muriel Enos, who is mostly on the phone while Brad Pitt hops around the globe. It's got David Morse, and it's got the Doctor Who guy, Peter Capaldi.
Okay.
I'll give a brief synopsis. The life For former United Nations investigator Jerry Lane and his family seems content. Suddenly, the world is plagued by a mysterious infection, turning whole human populations into rampaging, mindless zombies. After barely escaping the chaos a million different times, Lane is pursued to go on a mission to investigate this disease. What follows is a perilous trek around the world where Lane must brave horrific dangers and long odds to find answers before human civilization falls. I'm not the only person that doesn't like this movie. It only gets a 66% on Rotten Tomatoes. And I think that's fair because, like I said, some of the acting does lift it a bit. But sometimes I think I might give it a little less because this is what happens when you have a lot of money and too many hands stirring the pot, including the studio. And that is my old man speech on World War Z. And now I will shut up and get off my soapbox.
No, that's fine. I have never seen it. I've only seen clips from it. From what I remember, it's very Danny Boyle-ish as far as the zombies are like ants. They're like fast and they climb and they jump and they snarl and all of that, right?
Yeah, but even in Danny Boyle, they don't do the ant thing, piling on top of each other and making bridges and stuff. That's
no. That
insects. Yeah,
I just meant Danny Boyle was the fast zombie guy, right?
Definitely fast zombies, and I don't have a problem with fast zombies if they're done right. And I think Danny Boyle did them right.
Yeah. Oh, we had been talking offline earlier in the week, and I had said I've been watching the series that came out a few years ago called The Affair, and it was very interesting because it's a storytelling kind of story point of view. Side tangent, but I found out one of the reasons it's compelling is it's produced and executive produced by Danny Boyle.
Oh, there you go.
So lots of good characters, lots of really cool twists, neat stuff to it.
Danny Boyle is also a good example of a director that can direct multiple genres. He doesn't do a lot of horror movies.
True. But he does the horror movies that we like because they're more character based.
Right. And he's also an award-winning director, as is Mark Forster. But I'm telling you, Mark Forster does not know how to direct horror.
Does not. He does not know how to do it. Okay. Nope. Well, the topic today are the films. It's a double feature. So sit back and enjoy this. Hopefully it won't be horribly long, but we do have two movies to cover. And the way we like to cover them is talking about them kind of in detail and then also talking about their key references, of course. And both of them today, although in the science fiction category, are kind of horrific, or at least modestly depressing. So that's another thing to get ready for as we go into it. We are going to start in 1959 with a film called On the Beach, directed by Stanley Kramer, written by John Paxton and Neville Shute. It stars Gregory Peck, Ava Gardner, Fred Astaire, a bunch of other people that we'll get into when we get into casting. It was fairly well received at the time, lots of press about it, lots of hype about it, but it quickly fell off. And it's not a film that appears a lot on a lot of people's radar, especially when you go to somebody and say, what's your favorite post-apocalyptic movie? I do not think On the Beach would probably pop up. Might on some, but it probably wouldn't.
I can only find it on YouTube. I couldn't find it on any streaming service at all.
A brief synopsis. In 1964, so essentially this is a movie that is kind of projecting the near future at the time. So it was done in 59. This is 64. Atomic war wipes out all of humanity in the Northern Hemisphere. One American submarine finds temporary safe haven in Australia, where life as usual covers fairly depressing times. In denial about the loss of his wife and child in the Holocaust, American submarine captain Towers meets careworn but gorgeous Moira Davidson, who begins to fall for him. The sub gets a strange Morse code and starts to investigate. When they come back, return after about a month on the sea, we have the ending, and that leaves with this synopsis says, will Towers and Moira find comfort with each other? And I thought,
In
watching
the
the
final
film,
days of their life. It just
well,
looked up that quota.
spoiler alert, nobody will find comfort in each other
No.
in this movie, so to speak. Had you seen this film before?
No, I had never seen it. And I had
It,
never read the book either.
really? And did you do both for this, or did
No,
you
I
read it?
didn't. I
Okay.
just watched it. But a lot of people I knew in high school had to read this book. Somehow I got around it. I don't know. It was a high
Interesting.
school book choice. I just remember that the name Neville
Okay.
Shute.
Yeah. Neville
Mhm.
Shute. Yeah, I could imagine it being shown and or required for kids in
Mhm.
high school,
Like a sci-fi
especially.
class or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was only my second time seeing this. I had seen it once before decades ago and remember really liking it, but at the same time thinking, wow, it is definitely depressing from like the
Hmm.
very beginning of the film. But it also goes to show a brilliant director too. This is Stanley Kramer, whose credits are like Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, Mad, 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 Mad World, Judgment at Nuremberg. So he knows how to direct, especially in that high contrast black and white
Hmm.
sort of this film. It is in black and white, children, and it is good in black and white. So you can go and watch it anyway. What were your initial thoughts if this was the first time you saw it?
I loved it. I thought this movie was really, really good. I
Mm,
think the performances are good. I think the direction's good. I'm not sure I've ever seen a Stanley Kramer film, but I know he's very well known and like an award-winning director as well.
oh yeah.
And it is. I think the reason it's so successful is that it's treated so straightforwardly. It's not played up to be anything than what it is, just a movie about the end of the world. But I mean, it's like probably how, I mean, most times when you see movies about the end of the world, it's chaos. And there's really no chaos in this movie at all.
No. What's good about the movie that I like is, like we said, it is a science fiction film because science fiction, meaning a nuclear attack and residual radiation, is
Mm-hmm.
the plot line all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
And that's classifies it to me as science fiction, but there are no real effects in this. This isn't about action. This isn't about devastation. It's about how people react to the end of the world.
Right.
And some
It's
of it told in a
introspective.
very, very personal way. Were there scenes that stand out that you like?
Well, the scenes that are going to stand out for me are the ones that are closest to horrific, and that's when they go to San Francisco and San Diego. They kind of take the submarine. They're basically. I don't. Did you mention the fact that they're getting a signal from the states, so they think someone could be alive in the states?
Yes. So they had
Yeah.
two, essentially the submarine comes to town, it hangs out. They're still waiting for communication from the Northern Hemisphere and not getting any.
Yeah, they're in Australia.
And their scientists in Australia are trying to calculate the rate of radiation, and if it does slowly come from the northern to the southern hemisphere, which it eventually will, how long will that be? And they're saying 6 months. But then they start calculating, well, maybe if we send the sub, since we have the sub as a resource, maybe we send it way up to like Alaska and have it check on, see if the radiation is going away. That way we know we can at least survive the wave or something like that. But at the same time, they start getting these weird Morse signals, but they're not making any sense.
They're
It's
gibberish.
Morse code, but it's gibberish.
Mm-hmm.
So they're thinking maybe it's somebody who survived but who doesn't know Morse, and they're just tapping to get people to come there, and that's somewhere on the coast of America. So they send the submarine on a reconnaissance mission to
Yeah. So
find
Gregory
out.
Peck and the boys go to America
Yep.
in the submarine. They pull up, under the Golden Gate Bridge, and one guy who is from San Francisco decides he wants to die there, and he actually abandons ship. And they
Hmm.
talk to him for a little while, and then they say, "You realize we're not coming back?" He says, "Yeah," and he stays. So then they go on down to San Diego, and they send that guy behind me in the radiation suit or whatever
Yep.
out to go investigate where this signal is coming from. And it turns out it's really dopey, but like a window shade has latched on to a Coke bottle or something, and it's like moving this thing that's tapping out gibberish, and that's the signal they were getting. It was basically the wind blowing a window shade.
Yep.
So he comes back, and then they go back to Australia, and somebody gets sick. Is it the same guy? I think it may be the same guy.
It is the same guy.
That gets sick first, and so they realize that the radiation is headed their way and that they're all going to die. So they have government issued sleeping pills, permanent sleeping pills. But anyway, I jumped ahead of everything. What I was going to say is my two favorite scenes would be those scenes, San Francisco, San Diego.
I agree with both of those. I think the way he heightens the tension of the expedition in San Diego is great. I think the plot twist of he jumped in the tank and he's wanting to stay in San Francisco because that's where his family is. And then just the next morning he's on the boat fishing or on the dock fishing, and the submarine comes up, and just the conning tower enough to talk to him, and the captain starts talking to him. That's just such a powerful scene of him going, "I'll be okay, Captain. How long do you think I have?" And we go, "We don't know. It could be weeks." Yeah. That's just chilling. And then the way they decide to end it, they could have easily ended this with them coming back to Australia and saying, "Well, then this just is what it is, and we're just going to end out our days here." But instead, the whole crew goes to him and says, "We know we're going to die soon, and we want to die at home. So we want to go home." American. So they leave Australia. And that parting shot of Moira standing on the beach or on the cliff head, really, as the submarine goes through the bay. That's one of my favorite scenes, is that shot. And another one of my favorites is, I like just because of the acting and the dialogue, is the scene with Tony Perkins talking to the doctor about getting the pills for his wife. Just since he's going on the expedition, this reconnaissance expedition, if something should go wrong, he wants to make sure his wife and his newborn baby have these pills.
Yeah, her reaction to it kind of ticks me off a little bit, though.
Well, she's fragile, Jim. She's fragile, and
she acts like it's him wanting her to do the deed with the baby instead of him doing it, but when actually he's going off on a mission. Anyway.
Yeah, she kind of jumps the gun a little bit. He's kind of saying, "You need this just in case." And she's like, "Oh." But then again, when he comes back, she's gone. I mean, she's broken. So she's fragile anyway. But I did like that scene a lot. Oh, and Gregory Peck. I mean, how can you not? I mean, gee, he's so good.
I think he was very influential in getting this film made, too.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, he was a very anti-nuclear guy, and he wanted this made. Now, from what I understand, they made changes that Neville Shute did not like, but it was it was something of a passion project, I think, for him. That's what I read.
Well, in my last two scenes, I guess I like the who could have started this, how did this start scene with Fred Astaire and all the sailors sitting around talking, and his basic line about, well, it's because we built these weapons that we thought we would never use. We swore we would never use them, and this is humanity. We will, of course, use them. We always will. And that mentality was so pervasive after the bomb and in the 50s, and it still is. It's almost 100 years later, and it's
I think everyone
terrifying.
Needs to watch this movie right now.
Yeah,
especially leaders,
especially government leaders. Yes, please watch and see how easily it could just happen. ISS came out this year, which is essentially the same thing, except they're on the space station, not on a submarine.
Okay,
but it's that sort of thing where you watch the world die,
right?
Essentially, that scene, and then my last one is the way he does the montage at the end of, like, it's almost like Jim Jones of giving out. The church is the one distributing, or in front of the church is the health organization distributing the pills. and everybody having this big come to Jesus rally. And then later on, less and less people are coming to this come to Jesus rally. And I think the last image in the movie is of that banner of
Oh yeah,
swaying in the wind with nobody around and
there's still
everybody
time,
gone.
brother, or
Yeah, there's
something.
still time. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's no
Yeah.
time. It's
So
like ironic.
creepy. Yeah. So painful. But I had said Gregory Peck because I thought it was a good segue to cast, because I do love the
Oh,
cast
sure.
of this movie.
Yeah, he's great. I mean, this is just a solid cast of A-list actors and some that I'm not even really that familiar with. It includes Oscar winner Gregory Peck and 3 Oscar nominees, Fred Astaire, Ava Gardner, and Anthony Perkins. We know Gregory Peck from I know Gregory Peck mainly from his scary movies like The Boys from Brazil and The Omen.
Yeah.
But he is probably most known for To Kill a Mockingbird, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
And he played Commander Dwight Lionel Towers. His love interest in the movie is Ava Gardner, and I don't know much about her, only that she was married to Frank Sinatra at one time.
Yeah.
And that she was like known as this legendary Hollywood beauty. I have movies that she didn't do movies that I really have seen. She was in Night of the Iguana, and she was in Magambo with Clark Gable, I believe. Her ex-husbands are all famous. They were Sinatra, Mickey Rooney, and Artie Shaw, who was a musician. She played Myra Davidson. And what I liked about her in this movie, especially having never seen her, is that she's clearly like an alcoholic. I mean, she's a drunk, and she's not getting any better because she knows the world's going to end. So she just gives into it. But then she falls for Gregory Peck, and he can forgive her alcoholism because he can't get over the fact that his wife and kids are probably dead. So there's this romance, this like dysfunctional almost romance that develops in between them. And she's upset because he won't sleep with her. He doesn't want to sleep with her because he feels like he's cheating on his dead wife. And then eventually, I guess it's after he comes back and realizes everything in the States is gone, that they do have sex. But he does leave her in the end to go back to America with the boys. You have that sad ending.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
she is phenomenal in this
she's
movie.
great in this.
We talk about how do your characters enter the movie, because entrances are important, both stage and film. I love the entrance of Peck in this because even before the credits, they're on the submarine,
right,
looking and scanning and doing, and it's all this perfunctory Hunt for Red October-y kind of feel to it. It was great before the credits even. But her entrance, we tease her because Perkins talks about her, going, well, do we want to bring her to the party tomorrow with the captain? Because she's kind of a drunk, and and they all set it up, and then she enters the next scene, and you go, yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah, she's great. And I love it because you expect with some of these old time movies with A-list stars, you expect the characters to be sort of stereotypical, and her character is very complex.
All of them are. That's why this is so well written. Perkins is complex. Fred Astaire is complex.
Fred Astaire is really complex. And that's who I'll go to next, because we just know him from being a dancer. This was his first like serious movie. He was in things like Top Hat and Funny Face. Of course, I know him from Ghost Story, which was the one horror movie I know that he did.
Of course you do.
He plays Julian Osborne, who was he one of the researchers on the bomb? He knows a lot about the bombs.
Yeah, he's essentially the chief scientist in Australia related to nuclear physics. So he knows all about the bombs.
He knows what
he knows
happened
all
and
about
what's
nuclear
going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, he knows they're all going to die. And he's the one that ends up killing himself at the end, but not by using a pill. He gets in his favorite race car. He's a race car driver, and basically just shuts the garage door and asphyxiates.
Yeah, he commits suicide.
He commits suicide at the end.
And I love the fact that although that part of it kind of slows down for me, the race itself, I'm kind of like, eh.
Yeah, it's okay.
But what I did like about it was that was another layer to his character. He was not a race car driver. He was a scientist,
He
but
wanted
he
to be.
built this
Yeah.
car and he wanted to race and he won.
Yeah.
He won the Grand Prix of Australia,
And of
essentially.
course, the whole cast is there to see it, which is a
Of
little
course.
Hollywood.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and my whole thing, you start at the very beginning saying what a luxury petrol is, and it's hard to find, and there's no refineries really in Australia, even down to the fact that we have these businessmen on horseback in one of the establishing scenes and everything. Yet you're going to have this big, huge race with all this fuel. I'm going, really? Really? Would
Mhm.
you? Would you? But again, by then, I think most of the continent is accepting or having to say this is it, the last hurrah. But yeah, seeing him just put his winning plaque on the hood of the car and then just walk back, stuff the stuff underneath the garage door, and then come back and start the car. You just go,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah, it's after
Yeah.
his final scene with Myra because he was in love with her too, but she wasn't in love with him.
Yeah, and correction, it's Moira. It's very
Right.
Australian, Moira.
Moira. Yeah, none of them have Australian accents, by the way. Tony Perkins tries and it's not good.
Yeah, no, it's not good. Just ignore that part. That's
So
only in two scenes.
let's go to Tony Perkins. Anthony Perkins played Lieutenant Peter Holmes. We know him, of course, from The Black Hole.
Yeah, right. Of course.
I'm just kidding.
His most popular film.
He is Norman Bates. He's a great actor. This was him in his prime because I think it was the year before Psycho, wasn't it? 1959 when this came out?
Yes.
Yeah, it was. So it was the year before Psycho. He was in his prime, and he's great in this. I've got no complaints, even though he has a funky accent. Mary Holmes, his wife, is played by Donna Anderson, and she is the one character in this I do have a bit of a problem with, as we said earlier. She did not do a lot. She got lucky and was in this and Inherit the Wind, but like the only other movie I recognize that she was in was Count Yorga Vampire, which I think is a Hammer film, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a 60s horror movie. So that's Donna Anderson. And then I've got a few names of other people, but I think they're pretty much Australian and I don't know them. Do you have any other cast members that you knew?
No, not really to stand out. All of them are good. They're strong. I like the way they don't totally cliche out the sailors and they don't fly and place over here as all the villains, the scientists. Everybody kind of gets their own say, whether it's at the party when they're all drinking and kind of having to accept it, or whether it's the sailors on the submarine itself and having to deal with the fact that this reconnaissance is showing that really nobody's freaking alive anywhere. So I thought overall it was all of the cast was strong. Stanley Kramer is such a really, at that time to me, was such a really great visual director. He never did anything that was, ooh, that's such a cool shot that pulls you out of it. Everything was there for a reason. And especially a lot of the placement and stuff. There's one, I'm trying to remember if it's Perkins saying goodbye or if it's Gregory Peck saying goodbye to Moira, but they're in the foreground and they kiss and they turn the lights out and now suddenly they're in silhouette.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes to the door and she stays in barely just a little bit of glimmer and he goes to the door and you just see his silhouette go and leave. And just simple setup, no movement, no camera movement, just here we go. He's just, I like the way he kept this whole depressing undertone from the very beginning.
Totally agree.
We have hope when the submarine goes out and you think, well, they'll find something.
A little bit.
And not. And the fact that he keeps that last act continuing, even through the race and the population killing themselves, and this, it's a little bit of a daunting, depressing kind of film at the end.
Yeah, there are some awards for this film. It was nominated for 2 Oscars, editing and music. I'm a little surprised it wasn't nominated for more than that. BAFTA over in England nominated Ava for Best Foreign Actress.
Because she's not She's not English. Yes.
I guess because she's not English. And Kramer actually won the United Nations Award. I didn't know they had a United Nations Award, a BAFTA thing, but that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
It was nominated for 4 Golden Globes, picture, director, supporting actor Fred Astaire, and it won for score, which I did like the music in this movie.
And it was Ernest Gold. Ernest Gold did the music. His big thing that he was known for was Exodus.
Okay.
That huge theme from Exodus was his big deal.
Okay.
But he did some Hitchcock. He did a lot of Kramer. He did It's a Mad, Mad World. And I think he did Inherit the Wind too.
Okay.
So
and which explains why that lady was cast, because I forgot that he had directed Inherit the Wind as well.
Yeah.
And then lastly, it is not on the 1001 movies you must see before you die list. And I totally disagree with that. I think this movie should be.
I think along with, we've got another post-apocalyptic coming up and everything else. And I think this one deserves its place on that list more than that one.
Oh, even though this is far superior. Yeah.
But I think this is definitely deserves to be on there. Keys? You want to go to Keys?
I had one little trivia bit, and then we can.
Yeah.
Well, first, we already said that Fred Astaire launched his non-musical dramatic acting career with this film. But this film is included in the American Film Institute's 1998 list of the 400 movies nominated for the top 100 greatest American movies. So that there says, why aren't you on the 1001 movie list before you die? I don't understand that. So anyway, it is on some prestigious lists that are other than that. So,
well, and I guess a trivia thing would be this was made with the permission of the Australian government. He had originally sought the U.S. Naval support, and they said that they would not, because the movie showed that America was part of the World War, and they didn't want to be a part of that. So Australia said, well, come down here, mate. No one can talk like us, but we got these submarines you can use. So they didn't. So it is a redressed Australian submarine. But the set looks great.
Yeah. I mean, everything looks great in this movie. And I love black and white. I mean, we don't get black and white that often, but I love black and white movies.
That's another scene. Well-told storytelling, screenwriting, and direction is the scene in San Francisco when he lets basically the entire command crew look through the periscope.
Yeah.
And see that San Francisco's a ghost town.
That way nobody will be in denial.
Yeah, and the way they do it is with everybody looking, and then they close the bars on the periscope, and then it suddenly cuts, and another person's looking, and they close the bar. It was a really neat sequence of montage there for that.
Yeah, Gregory Peck was a very nice commander. You don't see a lot of nice military commanders.
Ironic you should do it. One of my first keys is so weird, but you said it, and you gave me a perfect transition without knowing. He reminded me of Rock Hudson as a submarine commander. Do you remember that movie?
Yeah, Ice Station Zebra.
Yes.
Okay.
I said, man, both of them as two sub commanders would have been great.
Well, yeah, you're absolutely correct, and you have thrown me a bone for my next key.
Yeah,
my next key is this movie is melodrama done right. And the only other director I know that does it as well is Douglas Sirk, who did melodramatic movies with Rock Hudson. He did 2 or 3 of them. So it's kind of ironic that you see him a little more Rock Hudson and I see the director a little more Douglas Sirk. That's bizarre.
Yeah. It's that this if you looked at this straight on, even at the character descriptions, you could see melodrama all over it, but they play it so realistically and the screenplay is so tight that it's believable and it works. Plus the fact that, again, they're not obsessed with trying to show massive devastation or huge special effects or anything else. It's focus on the people.
Yeah. Usually the melodrama comes from the music. Usually it's layered music. And that's what Douglas Sirk builds his melodrama with. He did
And I even put
Magnificent
in,
Obsession, All That Heaven Allows, those kind of
I
movies.
put in my watch notes the premise being what would happen if the entire world knew they had 5 months to live? How would society react? They
Chaos.
knew there. Yeah, it would be chaos.
That people would be shooting people on the streets.
Yeah, rather than just saying, "Hey, can't we make the last 5 months the best we ever had? Can't we have a Grand Prix race?" Whatever it would be. No, 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 all for me, and I'm going to survive. I don't care about you people.
Yeah, formal
Sadly.
dress cocktail parties.
Yeah. Yes,
They have a formal dress cocktail party in this.
Um, two big keys for me, of course. One is Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, the movie, not the
Okay.
series. So Irwin Allen's movie, which came out about 5, 6 years after this, it basically follows a submarine, and the Van Allen belts of the Earth catch fire, which starts changing the climate. And it's all about the submarine being the only thing that can actually, go under the water, so it's not, heating up and all that, being able to see if they can save the Van Allen belts. So it was a pseudo post-apocalyptic disaster movie with a submarine. So there's that.
Interesting. Okay.
And there was a series that came out a few years ago. I think it was a AMC series or something like that. Anyway, it's called The Last Ship. Pretty good cast, pretty strong. I only watched a couple of episodes, but
Isn't
I
that
think it
one of those
lasted.
CW shows?
It might have been.
Yeah,
I think it lasted like
is.
3 or 4 seasons.
Got like
And
pretty
basically
people and not really good shows.
Well, basically the story of it was a U.S. destroyer that finds out that while they were at sea, a virus has basically decimated the world,
Oh,
and they're
okay.
the last ship left.
Well,
And
now I'm
they end up
intrigued.
trying to find these ports of call that haven't been infected, so they don't infect the crew. But also, how do they restore society, or what happens now? So it was the 2 episodes I saw were pretty good, actually.
Okay.
So the last, yep.
I've got the gamut, I guess, of nuclear apocalypse movies. I mean,
Ew.
the two. I just wrote two down that I knew of. But I mean, obviously, any nuclear apocalyptic movie would be a key to this. But the ones I wrote down are the British one, Threads, and the American one, The Day After.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's another one called Testament. And the thing about all three of those is it's the setup, it's the characters, and it doesn't end happy.
And it's the end.
It just doesn't end good. Nope. It is the end you're doing.
Yes, exactly. You mentioned Jim Jones when you were talking about some of the stuff at the end. But what I was going to say, and I use this key a lot when films do this, and so obviously he wasn't the first because this movie came out before, but John Carpenter in Halloween does that series of still shots with nobody in them. And that's kind of what he does at the end of this. And then it cuts to that final place where that sign says there's still time, brother, which is just like an ironic stab because obviously there is no time. It's over. So, yeah. But it reminded me of Halloween at the end.
That's a good one. That's really good. I've got Crimson Tide just because, again, it's a submarine movie, and it's a submarine movie about nuclear and about conflict. Much more conflict than in this. This is more of how do we survive. It's more of a suspense thriller. And along that same line, Failsafe, which is a film we need to do. But it's again, that nuclear holocaust. What do we do at the end of the world? How do we face nuclear destruction sort of film? So
I don't have any others that I came up with. I've got some I lifted from IMDb.
Sure.
Like I'm not a Morrissey fan or whatever that band was he was with, but he wrote a song called Every Day is Like Sunday, and he based it on this film. That song is based on this film.
Okay.
Which is interesting because it would have probably been written in the 80s or 90s. So he's a fan from a movie that old. It also inspired Midge of the band Ultravox to write the song Dancing with Tears in My Eyes. So that's 2 songs this movie inspired, if anybody's fans of those artists out there.
I've got 2 post-apocalyptic, one we've done, one we're going to do, A Boy and His Dog and The Road. Both of those have that kind of depressing ending, and we're following people after a nuclear holocaust.
Look at you dropping hints.
One ends with kind of a wink, and one does not. So there's that.
Mhm.
And then my last one is I had to look this one up because I remembered the scenes from it but couldn't find it. But there was a Twilight Zone episode called Midnight Sun. It actually came out, I looked it up in 1961, so 2 years after this movie. And basically what happens in it is there is an accident and the Earth starts changing its orbit and going toward the sun and getting hotter. And I thought that would be a cool last key and a segue.
It is the last key and a segue, but I do want to say one other thing. There was a made for television remake of this in 2000 that originally aired on Showtime. And it is in many ways more disturbing to view, according to IMDb. It is a far more graphic in its depiction of death and destruction in San Francisco. Many of the characters are portrayed as grittier and angrier, and also the terrible effects of radiation sickness are realistically depicted with some of the characters. So if you want a little bit more of a gritty version of this, apparently there is a version out there from the year 2000 that was, I guess, a Showtime.
I was not aware of that at all.
Me
I guess I
either.
should look that up.
Yeah. But meanwhile, we were talking about the Earth is plummeting toward the sun.
Getting hotter. Yes. Which is
hotter.
a segue to, hey, the day the Earth caught fire, which is our second feature of today's podcast YouTube show. It came out in 1961. So this was the same year as that Twilight Zone episode.
Don't you love how
aired.
the posters are in like bright colors and yet both films are in black and white?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. This was directed by Val Guest. Writers were Wolf Mankiewicz and Val Guest, and the stars Edward Judd, who we'll talk about, Janet Monroe, Leo McKern, pretty large cast actually, and pretty good. The basic in a nutshell of this one is, again, post-apocalyptic, not nuclear, but sort of nuclear. So things start happening on the Earth that are kind of weird. There's some weird earthquakes. There's some weird tidal shifts, some weird temperature changes. Newspaper reporters start investigating it, saying this is odd. What's going on? They finally find out that, unbeknownst to each other, the United States and the Soviet Union did nuclear testing at exactly the same time. And what they did from that was shift the axis of the Earth. Later on, it's found out that not only did they shift it, they knocked it out of orbit. And it's not only rotating odd, it's rotating closer and closer to the sun. So end of the world is coming, folks. And what do we do about it? Same process. Had you seen this film before?
Not at all. I had
Really?
never even heard of this film, but we needed a double feature when we were putting this list together over a year ago.
Yep.
And we decided this would pair up pretty nicely, even though I had not seen it. So
I had not either. So honestly, I had heard about it and I'd seen some clips from it, some of the disaster shots, but I had never seen this movie before. What did you think?
It's not as good to me as On the Beach. It's primarily told from like newscaster point of view. And I don't know. I really can't put my finger on what I don't like about it, but the one thing I can say is that it plays like a comedy the way the dialogue is so fast and snappy.
Oh yeah,
and it's not a comedy, so it's kind of like
a very late 40s, early 50s screenplay. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think I'm like, do British people think that just because you're a newscaster, you got to talk fast and smarty? I don't know.
Sort of, yeah. That's the cliche of it.
Yeah.
I think that's basically due to Val Guest. Val was a prolific writer, more so than a director. If you look at his screenplays and writing, and he was a big fixer of dialogue, very witty sort of guy. So Val Guest did a lot of script doctoring in addition to script writing. So I think a lot of the dialogue is that. Yeah, this strikes me as, you said it was difficult to describe. It's almost like an extended Twilight Zone episode or a television episode. I
Mm-hmm.
don't like the direction in this as opposed to I like the direction in of Stanley Kramer. The direction in this is very flat, very straightforward, kind of boring in a lot of ways. He doesn't do a lot of montage work. There's not a showing doing a big pan of people standing in line to get water is not showing the ominousness of the situation,
No,
you know?
not really.
Uh, so there's not as good a photography in this. And yeah, if you don't like witty dialogue or dialogue snappy, I guess, not witty, but snappy, probably not the best film to choose, I guess.
Right. And I mean, sex is a subplot of both films, but in
Yes.
the first film on the beach, it's like something that two people are having to come to grips with before it finally happens. One because he's grieving, and the other because she wants it so bad because she's scared and a drunk. This one, it's like he is a horn dog. I mean, he's ready to go with this girl, and it is apparent. And I think that I like the first version better, where it was used more as a meaningful push and not just a constant background thing in that it is in the second movie. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, definitely. I
Okay.
think On the Beach is much more of a story of love and romance
Right. It's
between
more
the two of
romantic.
them between Fred and her and him,
Mhm.
Fred Astaire's character actually giving her up.
Yeah, yeah.
As opposed to this one is very much into that late 50s, early 60s horn dog sort
I
of
mean, even his boss is saying, "You need a
Casanova-y.
girl. You need a girl. Go get a girl." I'm like, "Come on."
Yeah. Well, and I also think you just inspired me to kind of think about it. The precept going into On the Beach, even in the Gregory Peck character, is we're screwed. The world is doomed. Whereas this one isn't. This
Mm-mm.
one is much more of we could save it or we can fix it or we're not going to believe it. This can't be happening kind of subtext underneath it. And that's a big difference between these two films, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
yeah. It's Armageddon.
Yeah.
There's a key right there. We're
I
going to
guess
blast off and
uh,
destroy the sun.
keys would be, I mean, not keys, but scenes. Even looking at my watch notes, the two big things I've got for scenes are the opening images, the whole montage
Mhm.
because basically they do a hook and then he does a flashback to how this started. And then the ending, because the ending is just, again, bleak and not going to work. So those are the
Yeah, I
two I
mean,
have.
the only scene that sticks in my head is that scene behind me to the left when they're all, and that's probably not even a real shot. That's probably a production shot, but it's where they are all waiting for the announcement of the bomb to detonate. Because basically, folks, what you don't know is that they're trying to get the Earth back in its original orbit, so they're detonating like 6 or 8 nuclear bombs at the same time to try to
Yeah.
shift the Earth's gravitational orbit.
Yes.
That scene, that's the only scene I really can think of. And then, like you said, that scene, the other scene behind me, I think is from the trailer. And the trailer was in color, but it was like just a wash of color. It's really
Mhm.
weird because the movie's in black and white. So
Yeah.
I remember that as well. But this movie to me is not memorable like On the Beach is.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I don't think it has the same. I don't think it has the same resonance as
Mm-mm.
On the Beach,
No.
of course. And I think a lot of that has to deal with the fact that we don't really care as much about these characters.
No. No, not at
Um,
all. We're not invested in it. With On the Beach, you wake up in bed with Anthony Perkins and his wife. You see Gregory Peck with his men. I mean,
mhm.
you're immediately you relate to those people. I don't relate to anybody in this movie.
And even though you don't see really deaths in on the beach, the sailor in San Francisco that we know is going to die is more poignant than the disaster scenes in this, showing the
Right.
cars flip over and walls collapse and fire everywhere and all of that. We don't care about it. Again, to the point we said earlier, this is more spends a lot more time on effects than it should on relationships.
And it's a little more sci-fi than the other one as well, with the whole Earth's orbit shifting and heading toward the sun.
It's not just, radiation is coming.
Yeah. I do have one background note. The movie received an X certificate from the British Board of Film Censors, barring anyone under 16 from seeing it. Why do you think that is? Because of the subject matter? Because it's
maybe
not violent, really.
Well, there's the beatnik riot scene. That's really the only.
It's like a parade.
Violence, but
I thought it was like a parade. You could see it in that picture behind me.
But no, they assault her. You know.
Oh yeah, that's right. They do. They break into her apartment. You're right. I forgot about that.
So and the guy falls off the elevator shaft. So maybe
he kills him, doesn't he?
Yeah, darn right. Yeah. He pushes him.
Yeah,
but he deserves it.
So
crazy young whippersnapper
trying to get after my piece.
Yeah, you just need a girl. Go get a girl.
That's my girl, not yours. I'm going to throw you down an elevator. Yeah, that was kind of weird. That kind of took me by surprise. I forgot about that.
Yeah. Let's see. I've got some. Well, that's trivia stuff. I'll save that for trivia, production-wise. Cast?
I do have a little bit of casting notes, not much. Sure. Did you notice the big cameo?
Yes, Mr. Caine. I did.
Yeah, Michael Caine has a cameo toward the end when Peter is driving to Jenny's apartment. He stops to talk to a policeman, and the reason for that is that they were good friends. So Edward Judd and Michael Caine, that is. Janet Monroe, I was like, why does that name seem familiar? I thought maybe she was a Hammer actress, but she's not. She's a Disney actress.
Really?
She was the girl in Swiss Family Robinson, another movie I would put on this podcast.
Yeah, we should.
I love that movie. She was also in Darby O'Gill and the Little People. She did a few other Disney films, and she was also in The Crawling Eye. That's a sci-fi film you may be familiar with. Yep. I've not seen that one. So that's Janet Monroe. Leo McKern, and both of these got billing higher than Peter, played by Edward Judd. But Leo McKern he played Bill McGuire. We know him from another movie that we should do on this podcast called Lady Hawk. He played Imperious. You probably know him more for a movie called A Man for All Seasons, in which he played Oliver Cromwell. Yeah.
Yep.
Edward Judd played Peter Stenning. Well, where have we seen Edward Judd, David?
In a very, very, very good, even though you don't like it, movie called First Men in the Moon.
Yeah, the comedic Ray Harryhausen moon venture.
He also did, I found out in research, he also did another movie that I have said from the beginning I need to put on our list, and I never remember it when it's list time, Island of Terror. Scared the crap out of me when I was a kid, and it turns out he's the lead in that movie, and it's really good.
Oh, remind me to put that on the list.
Island of Terror.
Oh, yes, it's going to be something like I saw that was scary at the time and then not scary at all now.
I don't know. Those creatures in it are pretty scary. They suck your bones out.
Edward Judd kind of got typecast. By the end of the 60s, he'd become associated mostly with science fiction films. He did X the Unknown, The Day the Earth Caught Fire, First Men in the Moon, Island of Terror, and Invasion, which was in 1965. I think I said late 60s, but it's just the 60s in general.
I also have in my trivia notes that he did not have the career he could have had because he was known for being very difficult on set.
Oh, well, that makes sense. That's why he's got third billing in this movie.
Yeah, he was supposedly quite a handful on set. So there's that.
Oh, well, okay. I thought I might have something to that. Judd made sporadic appearances mostly in television until the early 1990s. This character of Peter Stenning was originally written with Richard Burton in mind.
I could
Hence
see
the
that.
drinking, womanizing, snappy dialogue. But the producers could not afford him, so Peter Finch was also contemplated but unavailable. So
Okay.
this movie was not written for him. And had either of those other two been cast, they would have been top billing.
Yep.
So anyway, that's all I have on on Edward Judd. And then honestly, everyone else is a British actor or actress, and I don't have anything on them. The guy that played Jacko, Michael Goodcliffe, I've got that he was in Peeping Tom and A Night to Remember, and that's it. And as far as awards, it did win a BAFTA for screenplay. I don't understand that. It was nominated for a Hugo for Best Dramatic Presentation, and it is not on the 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die, which I completely agree with. So there's that. I know I'm a little harsh, aren't I? I'm not a fan. I mean, this movie was okay. It just did not wow me.
Would it have been better if it hadn't been paired with the other one?
That's
You know
a
what I
good
mean?
question. How can I answer
if you
that?
had just but I mean, what I'm saying is take it out. If you had just looked at this by itself, would
I
you have
know.
gone, oh,
But
not
since I
bad?
didn't,
But
since I didn't, no, honestly, I was a little annoyed by the quippy dialogue.
Okay, see, I kind of like that sort of dialogue. And also, Mankiewicz, who helped write this, also came from theater. So he's used to fast dialogue, lots of it, especially at that time in the 60s.
Well,
late
and
50s.
maybe you're right. Maybe I would have liked it better had I not seen the other first. But the other was just so good to compare the two. There's just no comparison.
I mean, yeah, when you watch these back to back, you're looking at, oh, that's an Oscar nominated movie, should be. This one is a B movie ripoffy.
If they were to drive in, it'd be the second feature.
Yep, it would. Trivia wise, I've got Val Guest did a lot of script doctoring for Hammer Films. I didn't know that, but just to let you know.
He also directed the original Casino Royale with Bond. Yeah. Sorry,
and
did I steal that?
No, that was good. And that was co-written by Mankiewicz with him as well. So they must have been writing partners of some kind.
Didn't they have like George Lazenby in it or somebody before Connery came along? Yeah.
Yep. And I have Monty Norman did the beatnik music. So during your parade and they're going into all the kind of beatniky, the youth are rebelling kind of music, all during that scene, that all of that theme and the music underneath that was written by Monty Norman, who is the same guy who wrote the James Bond theme. So love to have a piece of his estate. That would be crazy.
For sure. I have a trivia. The Val Guest was also the director of the Quatermass Experiment. You turned me on to Quatermass with Quatermass in the Pit a few seasons back. James Needs, the editor of this film, used stock footage from Quatermass Experiment in this movie. The fire truck racing through the night scene was actually lifted from the Quatermass movie that was also directed by Val Guest. I thought that was interesting.
Interesting.
They're cannibalizing their own films.
Notes and stuff and trivia. It has a very slow buildup. I wrote that in my watch notes. It has some really early optical effects. So like the first effect we really see that affects them personally is the fog bank. This fog bank that creeps across the Thames and up over the London Bridge and everything else. And I thought overall, when you look at it, although it does use a lot of stock footage, I have in my notes too, even down, especially when they're dealing with the whole world and you're seeing riots in other cities and all that, that's all stock newsreel footage, it looks like. But they do have some pretty cool miniatures in this, some streets and some buildings and some bridges.
Like the Irwin Allen sequence? Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
I gotcha. Where it's like earthquake or towering
and that's
inferno.
definitely in my note, in my keys is Irwin Allen. You got it.
Sorry.
But, no, I'm sure I knew you would have it too.
We always step on each other's keys.
But I have in my notes, I think the deficit of this movie is it doesn't focus on the scientists, and it's supposed to be a disaster movie. It focuses on the reporters trying to get the story rather than on the scientists who are either A, happy of what's happening, guilt-ridden, terrified of what's happening, whatever. But so the emotion at that point, especially journalists are supposed to be non-committal. They're just reporting the facts. So there's not a lot of emotion that goes into it. Whereas even if you had one supporting character like the Fred Astaire character that was a scientist that was remorseful or upset or terrified.
Yeah, why are you guys so happy?
You might get a little bit more investment in it rather than, hey, we can survive this. It's okay. It's only going to get a little hotter. Don't worry about it.
One thing I did like was how both the characters of Peter and is it his news editor? Anyway, you find out that they're father and son, don't you, at one point?
Yes.
Yeah, and you don't know that, right? I mean, there's like all this bickering, like an old Cary Grant movie. And then all of a sudden he says dad, and you're like, oh, that's his dad? That kind of shocked me.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that connection might have been the one human connection they were looking for, but it doesn't play that way. Not like the Astaire character or whatever.
Agreed.
Yeah. I don't have any other trivia. I do have a little bit of keys if you want to go
I have
there.
a few keys. Yeah.
I will go ahead and say, again, this movie reads to me like a Cary Grant comedy as far as the quippy dialogue. And I couldn't think of the actual Cary Grant movie where they're in a news reporter situation, but I think it's His Girl Friday. I'm guessing. So I put His Girl Friday as a good film one. That's a good example of the same kind of repertoire or whatever.
Yeah, I've got Network, Newsies, any of the newsrooms sort of where we're following journalists and it's Whit and Perry all the time. And there's one that I couldn't remember. If you guys are out there listening, I didn't do it and I should have done my research, but if you guys are out there listening and can give me the title, there was a film, I think it was based on a play, but it was about a guy hiding out in a newsroom. And the entire plot is him trying to hide from the authorities in this newsroom, and we learn all these other characters. I think it's a Jack Lemmon movie, not certain, and didn't look it up. So
and Jack Lemmon was good with quick dialogue too.
You mentioned Irwin Allen. Yeah, this movie, as opposed to the other one is a character study. This one is treated as a disaster movie. This is a disaster movie all the way through it. And so it has all the tropes of a disaster movie.
It's just before we had magnificent special effects and stuff.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. I have one you'll appreciate. Speaking earlier, we talked about Danny Boyle, 28 Days Later, because of just desolate London, seeing Parliament and papers blow across the bridge and everything. I thought, oh my God, it's the very beginning of 28 Days Later.
Right.
So...
I have one you'll appreciate. I put A Boy and His Dog because of the whole sex angle. The boy and his dog, he's after sex. And in this one, I swear, Edward Judd is a horn dog getting in bed with that girl.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Let's get in the bathtub together. Come on. I've got War of the Worlds. Not only that whole kind of feel near the end of devastation, but the whole teenage riot scene. I mean, he turns the corner and they're all there and they rip him out of the car and turn the car over. And
are you talking the Spielberg one or the old one?
The old one, the good one.
The good one.
Sorry. The original War of the Worlds. Yes.
Yeah, my favorite. Yeah. I don't have many left. I mentioned Armageddon because they do try to fix the problem like they do in Armageddon when they send Bruce Willis and the astronauts onto that asteroid or whatever.
Yep.
But I'm going to go back to my old standby. I haven't used this one for a season or two. And that is, Where Have All the People Gone? That weird TV movie with Peter Graves where the sun starts giving off radiation and everybody turns to dust. And there's just a few people left wandering around in the world finding not dead bodies, but just clothing with sand in it.
Yep.
And I mean, I honestly, that's a childhood movie. It probably would suck to most people, but I would watch that movie again now before I would watch The Day the Earth Caught Fire.
Yeah. Probably. I would watch in my last key. I'm with you, but my last key is the one I used before. Twilight Zone's episode, Midnight Sun, 1961.
Okay.
A better, more emotional telling of this story.
Yeah.
So
There you go.
there you go. We done. We got it.
We are. I guess you could sum it up. I think it's going to be well known by now that David and I are very much enamored with On the Beach and a little
Yes.
less so of The Day the Earth Caught Fire.
Yeah.
I don't think we ran as long as we do on most double features. I think it's came in at a pretty good time. But we're going to cut it now. We would like to thank all you folks for joining us. If you like what you see, there's plenty of other stuff out there on YouTube or on the podcast airwaves. We've got various shows. And if you really like what you hear and you want to help us out, just always go over to Patreon. We have some additional shows there. Some are free, some are based on subscription tiers, and you can see what you like and choose. And until next time, when I think we're going to be kind of in the horror world, it was a horror selection anyway. It is a double feature, though.
Yes.
I will see you then, David.
See you then.
All righty. Bye.
You can't start the car. Johnny has the keys.